Every morning, Mr. and Mrs. Darling kissed their children Wendy, John, and Michael goodbye. Then Nana, the dog, brought their coats and walked them to school. When the children came home from school, they always played in Neverland. Neverland is different for every child, but all children play there. For Wendy and her brothers, Neverland was a beautiful island with Indians and angry pirates. One night, Mrs. Darling put the children into bed. Then she gave Michael his medicine.
Peter Pan doesn't like medicine,
Wendy said. Mrs. Darling remembered Peter Pan from when she was young.
He lived with the fairies,
she thought.
but he wasn't a real boy. Real boys grow up.
One morning, Mrs. Darling found some flowers in the children's room.
Peter Pan left them,
said Wendy.
He comes here at night when we're sleeping.
Wendy's only dreaming,
thought Mrs. Darling. But where did the flowers come from? That night, Mrs. Darling told the children stories. They were soon asleep, and Mrs. Darling was asleep too. Suddenly, Mrs. Darling opened her eyes. The windows were open, and there was a boy in the room. Mrs. Darling remembered him at once.
Peter Pan!
She cried. Peter flew out of the window, but Nana caught his shadow in her teeth. Mrs. Darling put the shadow away, but she was afraid.
He's going to come back for it,
she thought. Nana was afraid too. The next evening she made a lot of noise when Mr. and Mrs. Darling went out. But Mr. Darling put her out into the garden. Later, Peter and a fairy came back for the shadow. Wendy woke up and saw them.
Who's your friend, Peter?
She asked.
That's Tinkerbell,
he said.
She's a fairy.
Peter found his shadow, but he couldn't put it on.
I'll sew it on for you,
Wendy said. It isn't easy to sew a shadow onto somebody, but Peter didn't cry.
Now, thank me with a kiss,
Wendy said when she finished. Tinkerbell flew here and there angrily, but Peter gave Wendy a button. He didn't know about kisses.
I often come to your window and listen to your mother's stories,
Peter said.
Then I tell them to the lost boys.
Who are they?
Wendy asked.
Boys with no mothers.
Peter answered.
They live with me in Neverland. There aren't any mothers there.
Peter was very happy with his shadow, and he danced.
Come to Neverland and tell us stories,
he said.
I can teach you to fly.
What about my brothers?
Wendy asked.
Can you teach them too?
Oh, all right,
said Peter. Wendy woke them up. Peter taught the children how to fly. Nana could see them from the garden. She ran here and there, but she couldn't do anything. Then Mr. and Mrs. Darling came home.
Quick!
Cried Mrs. Darling.
The children!
Peter and the children flew out of the room and down the river, then out over the sea. They flew for many days and nights They were hot, then cold, then hot again. The children couldn't fly fast, and they often hit clouds. Sometimes Peter was bored, so he flew away from them and had adventures. Many times he nearly forgot about them. Once, Michael began to sleep. He fell down and down to the sea. Peter watched him and laughed. Seconds before Michael went into the sea, Peter flew down and caught him. One day, the clouds opened and the children saw a beautiful island.
That's Neverland,
Wendy cried.
Look, there's the pirate ship.
Called John.
And those are the Indians.
They were happy and very excited about their new adventures.
Be careful.
Peter said.
Pirates and Indians can kill you.
Suddenly, the children were afraid. Neverland was only a game before, but this island was real. Suddenly, there was a noise and smoke, and Tinker Bell and Wendy went up into the clouds.
The pirate ship is shooting at us.
Tinker Bell cried.
Come with me. I don't like Wendy. Now I can kill her.
She thought. Captain Hook and some pirates were in the forest. Hook was a big man with a killer's smile and a hook for his right hand. All the pirates were afraid of him. Suddenly, smoke came out of the ground near Hook.
The lost boy's house at last,
He cried.
It's under our feet. Shall we attack?
A pirate called Smee asked.
No.
Hook said.
Peter's away. I want to kill him. Peter's sword took off my hand, and then a crocodile ate it.
Hook told the pirates when they walked back to their ship.
Now the crocodile wants to eat me. But the crocodile ate a clock too.
Hook told them.
So when I hear the clock, I run away.
One day, that clock is going to stop, said Smee. Later, the lost boys sat outside their house. Suddenly, Tinker Bell and Wendy flew over them.
What's that, Tinker Bell?
Tootles called when he saw Wendy.
It's a Wendy bird.
Cried Tinker Bell.
And Peter says, shoot Wendy birds.
So, Tootles took an arrow and shot Wendy.
I shot the Wendy bird.
Tootles cried happily.
That wasn't a bird.
One boy said.
That was a mother for us, and you killed her.
Just then, Peter, John and Michael arrived.
I'm very sorry.
Tootles told them.
Tinker Bell said, shoot the Wendy bird. So I did.
Go away.
Peter told Tinker Bell.
I never want to see you again.
Never?
Tinker Bell asked.
Okay, for 1 week.
Peter said. Then Peter saw the arrow. It was in Wendy's button.
She isn't dead.
He cried.
The arrow hit my kiss. Bring dinner.
Peter told the boys. But there wasn't anything to eat, so everyone pretended to eat.
To the house.
Peter said after dinner. The lost boys went into some hollow trees. They went down inside the trees to a house under the ground. After that, Wendy, John, and Michael lived in the lost boy's house, and Wendy was the lost boy's mother. She put them into bed at night and told them stories. She sewed their buttons on and gave them medicine. They had lots of adventures. Soon, Michael and John began to forget their real mother. The lost boys often swam near some rocks. One day, 2 pirates came in a boat. They had Tiger Lily, an Indian, with them. They couldn't see the boys in the fog. The pirates tied Tiger Lily to a rock.
The water's going to be higher soon,
Laughed Smee,
I must help her.
thought Peter.
She's going to die.
Peter pretended to be Hook.
Cut the ropes.
He called. The pirates couldn't see Hook in the fog, but Smee cut the ropes. Tiger Lily quickly swam away. Then the real Hook came, and the pirates understood.
Where are you, Peter Pan?
They cried. Slowly, the fog went away. The pirates saw Peter on a rock with a sword in his hand.
Come and fight me.
He called to Hook. The pirates and the lost boys began fighting. Peter put his sword down and helped Hook to get up onto the rock.
Good form,
Thought Hook angrily. Then he cut Peter with his hook. It was bad form to attack Peter when he wasn't ready, and Hook knew that. But he wasn't a nice man. Peter fell, and Hook stood over him and smiled.
He's going to kill Peter.
Wendy thought, but she couldn't help him. Just then, Hook heard a clock.
the crocodile.
He thought. He jumped into the sea at once and swam to a boat. The other pirates went after him.
We won the battle!
The boys cried.
Peter saved me.
Tiger Lily told the Indians. After that, the Indians were friends with the lost boys. Peter was very happy. He could tell Indians and lost boys what to do. At night, the boys slept in their warm house under the ground. The Indians sat, waited, and watched for pirates. But the pirates watched them, too. One day, Wendy told the boys a true story about Mrs. Darling.
Our mother leaves a window open for us,
Wendy said at the end of the story.
so we can go home one day.
I went home once,
Peter said angrily.
but the window was closed. There was a new boy in my bed.
John and Michael were afraid.
Let's go home
They told Wendy.
before Mother closes the window.
Can we go with them?
The lost boys asked.
Go if you want.
Peter said quietly.
I'm staying here.
Suddenly, they heard noises above them.
The pirates are attacking.
Peter cried. Peter took his sword, but Wendy stopped him.
Don't go out.
She said.
You must stay with the boys.
Above them, the Indians fought bravely, but the pirates fought better. Soon, most of the Indians were dead. The boys sat and listened to the battle.
Who's going to win?
John asked.
I don't know.
Peter said.
We must listen for the drums. When the Indians win a battle, they play the drums.
Smee was by a hollow tree, and he heard the boys. Next to him was a dead Indian and a drum.
Tiger Lily saved us!
The boys cried when they heard the drums. So they went up their hollow trees. Peter stayed in the house and thought about Wendy. She wanted to go home, and he was sad. When Wendy and the boys came out of their trees, the pirates caught them. Hook took off his hat to Wendy, because it was good form.
Take them to the ship.
Hook told his men.
Wendy can be our mother, but the boys are all going to die.
Hook waited for Peter, but he didn't come out. Tinker Bell sat in a tree and watched Hook.
Peter's in the house.
Hook thought.
But how can I go down there? Hollow trees are for little boys, not big pirates.
But just then, Tootles came out of his tree. Tootles was a very big boy, so his tree was big. Slowly, quietly, Hook went down Tootles' tree. It was dark inside the house, but Hook could see Peter. He was asleep.
It isn't good form to kill a sleeping boy.
Hook thought angrily. He nearly left, but then he stopped and smiled. Hook took a bottle from his coat. He put some poison into Peter's medicine cup. Then he left.
Peter, wake up!
Tinker Bell cried.
What is it?
Peter asked.
The pirates took Wendy and the boys to their ship.
Peter jumped out of bed.
I must save them.
He cried.
But first, I must take my medicine.
Tinker Bell saw the poison bottle and cried,
Stop!
But Peter didn't understand. He took the cup. Tinker Bell flew across the room and put her mouth in front of the cup.
You drank my medicine.
Peter said angrily.
It wasn't medicine.
Tinker Bell answered.
It was poison.
Why did you do that?
Peter asked.
Now you're going to die.
Don't you understand?
Tinker Bell said sadly. Tinker Bell began to feel very cold, and Peter began crying.
Perhaps you can save me.
She told him quietly.
Fairies only die when children don't believe they are real. Ask the children, Peter.
Children dream of Neverland all the time. So Peter spoke to all the children of the world.
Clap.
He told them in their dreams.
Do you believe fairies are real? Then clap.
Some bad children laughed, but many, many children clapped. Soon Tinker Bell felt better again. She flew around the room happily. When Tinker Bell was better, Peter left.
I can't fly to the ship.
He thought.
The pirates could see me.
So Peter moved slowly through the forest. He made a noise like a clock. Some pirates heard him. They remembered the crocodile and ran away, but the crocodile heard him too. Peter came to the beach and saw the pirate ship. He began swimming. The crocodile was behind him. The boys were on the ship. They stood next to a plank with ropes around their arms and legs.
You're going to walk this plank and fall into the sea,
Laughed Hook.
Die bravely.
Wendy cried.
6 of you must walk the plank,
Hook said.
but 2 of you can live. I need 2 pirates for my ship.
No!
Michael cried.
Never!
Called Tootles.
Mother doesn't want us to be pirates.
Said John.
Then walk the plank, all of you.
Hook told them. Pirates pushed the first boy onto the plank. Then they heard a clock.
It's the crocodile. Hide me.
Hook told them. Hook hid behind his men.
I killed Peter Pan with poison.
He thought.
That was bad form. So now the crocodile is coming for me.
Peter pretended to be the clock, and he slowly went up a rope onto the deck. Most of the pirates were with Hook, but one pirate watched the boys. Peter killed him. Then he cut the boys' ropes.
Find guns and swords.
He told them quietly. Suddenly, the clock noise stopped.
Go and look.
Hook told a pirate. The pirate walked across the deck. Then he fell. He was dead. Suddenly, Peter jumped up.
Fight well, boys!
He cried. The pirates looked around them. The lost boys were free.
Now you're going to die, Peter.
Hook called. Hook's long sword moved here and there, but Peter was fast. Every time the pirate captain attacked, Peter jumped away. Then Hook lost his sword, but Peter stopped fighting and gave it to him.
Good form.
Thought Hook, angrily. Hook was tired. He fought worse and worse.
I can't win now.
He thought, so he walked onto the plank. Then Peter kicked him in the back.
Bad form.
Hook cried happily, and he fell into the crocodile's mouth. The pirates jumped into the sea and swam away.
We won!
The boys cried.
To England!
Peter told them. He was their captain now, and they were his pirates. They sailed the ship for many days and many nights. But one day, Peter said,
Let's fly from here.
Peter and Tinker Bell flew faster than Wendy and the boys. They soon lost Peter in the clouds. At the Darlings' house, Peter and Tinker Bell flew into the bedroom.
Quick!
Said Peter.
Close the window behind you. Wendy can't come home now.
He thought.
She must stay with me.
Then Peter saw Wendy's mother. She was asleep, and she dreamed of her children and cried. Suddenly, Peter understood. Mrs. Darling needed Wendy too.
Open the window, Tinkerbell.
he said sadly. Wendy and her brothers flew into the room,
Let's wake Mother up.
said the boys.
No,
Said Wendy.
let's go to bed and pretend to sleep.
When Mrs. Darling woke up, she saw the children in their beds.
I'm dreaming.
She thought, but they jumped out of bed and hugged her.
Come quickly.
She called.
Our children are home.
Nana and Mr. Darling ran into the room. Peter watched them, and he cried.
Can they live with us?
Wendy asked her mother when the lost boys arrived.
Of course.
Said Mrs. Darling, and she hugged them.
You can live with us too.
Mrs. Darling told Peter. But Peter didn't want to live in a house and go to school and grow up.
Wendy can visit you.
Mother said. So every spring, Peter took Wendy to Neverland. Peter never grew up, but every year Wendy was older. Then, one spring, Wendy waited, but Peter didn't come.
I'm not a little girl now.
She thought.
Peter's with new friends in Neverland.